Hello, QLR 1000 students. I'm recording this for my online class in case you missed my on-ground class or if you'd like a review refresher. I'm going to move fairly quickly here. Obviously, you can pause and rewind a video versus me talking live in class, I suppose. Uh, a lengthy chapter. We spread it out over 2 weeks for chapter 6 with the spring break in between. I did go ahead and put this data folder out here for two of the data sets that the PowerPoint in this chapter reference, the Juice Company, and New York City. So hopping into the PowerPoint, it's very lengthy, lots of very detailed instructions. Essentially, I cherry picked the slides, and I'm going to be going in order here during this presentation to create a lot of these graphs and charts. Again, very detailed instructions. Highly encourage you to review this, try some of these on your own with the data set. But again, my presentation here on this video follows along. So let's start with the juice company. So immediately what jumps out at me here, I've got some flavors, order numbers, dates, but a lot of missing data here. So a big part of the chapter talks about different types of missing data, those that occur naturally, unnaturally. This is certainly, think of this when you check out at Walmart and it gives you the 1 through 5 star rating. Most people skip that. I've been told when I've asked in class, and there's some poor data analyst on the other end that has missing data now and has to deal with that. Either filter it out, estimate what often a rating or missing data could be, or just omit those records entirely if it's going to skew your data. One cool thing about Excel is up here there's a conditional formatting. It's pretty neat. I can come in here, select. I do need to select my entire. So a quick way to select all your data, and there may be more than one method to do this, but certainly just ask ChatGPT. I even had to this evening. I'm like, how do I select the entire data set again? So it's Control Shift and then the arrow key over to the right and the arrow key all the way to the down. And immediately I noticed this is a pretty big data set, almost 20,000 rows of different sales order information. So now that I've selected my data set, I can go to this conditional formatting, create a new role. Lots of different options that you can play around with, but I'm going to be very focused here and say only cells that format. And I only want ones that have blanks. And I want to color those, oh, let's say a nice kind of bluish color, I guess. Click OK. OK. And now that those data rows and columns pop out where there's missing data. Another cool tip and trick for dealing with data, certainly you can sort in Excel, you can do filters very manually, but there's a really cool way to do it. It's called insert table. And so it's going to take all my data and create it into an Excel table. And it's just simply that. It'll automatically select the data for me. Make sure you don't have any columns without data because it'll typically stop there and not select your entire data set. But I'm just going to go ahead and accept this default. And wow, look at this. It already did some really cool stuff for me. For example, I can click on category and it gives me the categories of the different juice types. And let's say I only want to look at smoothies. Now I only have smoothies. That's pretty cool. What if I want only smoothies that are orange? Well, I can go to flavor and sort, just deselect all and say just orange or multiple categories. And then I also want to sort by sales. So I want to go from smallest or let's do largest to smallest. And so within a few simple clicks there, I created a table, did a filter, two filters, and summarized the data. So now I'm going to go ahead and it gives you this little symbol here that lets you know that you have a filter. I'm going to go ahead and select all again. And for the flavor, I'm going to go ahead and select all again. So the next thing that I noticed is, so I'm an analyst and my boss has asked me to look at this. Think of you're in your job and they want an answer by the end of the day on which distribution center is doing something. And so what I noticed, I've got these date fields here, but I'm really missing something. I'm interested in the time it actually took to deliver. Where do we have some distribution problems? And it took over a week or two. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and select this column, right click and say insert. And while I have that selected, I'm going to come up here. There's a quick way. I know you can right click and do format and do multiple clicking. Excel gives you this very easy way here. And I want this to be a number. And now in Excel, Excel's pretty powerful with doing date calculations. So if I just say, uh, so it's date delivered, so F2 minus the date ordered, and it's going to give me the number of days. Pretty cool. And it populated it all the way down for me. I've got 18 days for this order, 10, 5 for that day. Well, you know what? I don't want decimal points, so I can just come here and up at the top, remove the decimal points, just like that. And I definitely want to name this as days to deliver. Now, very quickly, I noticed, so I've got the dates, but I really want to know the actual year, the month, and the day, so I can actually analyze the data that way. So what I'm going to do is insert 3 more columns, insert, insert, and I'm going to make these also a number format. And I'm going to call this one year, this one month, and this one, drum roll, day. Pretty cool. So what I want to do is go in here and use a function statement. So all I have to do is say equals year, reference the cell E2, which is the date that it was ordered, and it's going to calculate the year for me. And again, I don't want these decimal points. I'm going to quickly do that format here. And then for month, it's a slightly different. I say equals text E2, and then I want it formatted as 3 characters. So like JAN for January. Hit go. Oh, look at that. Pretty cool. And then for day, it's just a function of day out of E2, and it's going to go ahead and pull that for me. So I feel pretty good that I've got enough data. Oh, a little short thing here off to the side. There's date functions are pretty cool. Just by simply putting in a formula that says today parentheses and then a date in the past. My birth date back in 1992. Although I'm a little bit older than that, and then just subtracting today's date from that date, and that was 11,935 days ago. So you can have some fun. Let's say 3, 1, come on, 2020. So how many days since COVID-19, right? So I think you get the point. So really the next step moving along, again, other than inserting in this as a table, another most powerful thing in Excel that I use very frequently, and I think many of you have done this already, even for this class or for work, is to insert a pivot table. So just selecting the range, I just want a new worksheet, insert pivot table, and there I go. So now I've got a few things that I can do. I'm not going to totally lecture here on pivot tables, but you have filters, columns, rows, and values. So very simply, if I'm interested in the distribution center is how I want the data, and I'd like that as rows. It puts it over here to the right, as you see. And then I would also like the year after each distribution center. And I would also like the sales. So I'm going to put that over here in the values. And it's a sum of sales. And there you go. Just like that, right? I'm going to make this a currency with no decimal points. So with just a few clicks of the mouse, you've taken 20,000 records and you've gone in and done some pretty nice summaries, seen the different sales. Now, just to demonstrate something very basic, if I just want to take out year, I just drag it back up where you can remove it. And so now what I want to do is a pivot chart. Pivot charts are very similar to inserting any other chart. I'll hit recommended, but they're a little more dynamic. So as your data changes, the chart will update itself. As you interact with the pivot table, it will update itself. And so I think, that's all right, a column, but I think I'm going to go with a bar chart. Yeah, I like this. This seems okay. Yeah, I'm going to sort it from smallest. There you go. Now, let's say I grabbed, let's say whether or not they're a new customer. And I want to put that under each distribution center. It automatically updated it for me. So kind of a neat thing for dynamic pivot tables tied to uh, pivot table charts tied to a pivot table. And so the last thing that I'd like to do here is insert something called a slicer. And then we're going to be done with the juiced up data company. So let's say your boss wanted you to run many scenarios and you created a PowerPoint with all 50 possibilities of some combination of variables. Probably not the best use of your time. And then, of course, he's going to ask for the one that you didn't produce, right? Well, you can go in and insert something called slicers. So you have to be under pivot chart analyze, insert slicer. And then I want to be able to pick variables that I can manipulate this chart with. So I want to do flavor. I'm just sort of randomly picking these and whether or not it's a new customer. And now it gives you these controls where you can go in and let's say I only want to look at apple flavors. So now it's by distribution center. Yes, no, they're a new customer. And now I want to look at beet. Well, you know what? This yes, no is kind of confusing me. So I can just simply come over here to my settings, remove it. I've got a little bit of a cleaner table now. And oh, look, beet sales are really, really low in Rhode Island. Probably zero, right? Carrot sales, cucumber, grape. Now I can say, well, whether or not they're a new customer, yes or no. And look at the differences. I think I can click both. No. So that is a slicer. So moving along, just to keep the pace going here. In the second part of the week, part B, I guess, of the module is what I meant to say. We get into looking at linear relationships in a little more detail. So I'm going to go into this New York data set here in a second. But so linear correlations, I guess is a better way to say it. So two variables that are highly correlated to each other may indicate that there's something going on with their relationship, right? That as college tuition increases, the percent of graduates increase. Now, it may need some more exploratory. Just because two variables are highly correlated doesn't mean there is a relationship there. There could be this spurious relationship where there's no cause and effect. So the example that I gave in class was that when ice cream sales increase, shark attacks increase. Highly correlated variables. But is that really the case? No. There's this uh, other variable, this lurking variable. And in this case, yes, when it gets warmer and it's the summertime, people consume more ice cream. And yes, shark attacks increase because they're in the water, but that's a lurking variable. So just because you get a high correlation doesn't mean the variables are necessarily related to each other. And just a footnote, if you wanted to get in the weeds, it's slightly different with some people will confuse correlation with causation, where you think of causation as being more cause and effect. So I think of it as like a prescription drug that's going through trials and markets. It's not necessarily that the patient and the drug are highly correlated, but there's a cause and effect relationship. The more trials you do, the more people get better, you can eventually get that drug to market. So that's more of a causation example. So let's see. We want a couple of charts here. So we want to jump in and look at percent graduates versus poverty rate for these different boroughs in New York. So let me jump to my New York data set. And so what I want to do is pick percent graduates and hold on my control key and select D, go to insert, scatter chart, and get a scatter. Okay. So now what I'm looking at, and I can right click anywhere and say add a trend line. I would say that there's definitely a correlation going on here, where you can see the higher the poverty rate, the low, oh, sorry, I've got this mixed up. I'm sorry. Yeah, so the higher the percentage of graduation rate, the lower the poverty rate. But as graduation decreases all the way down here to about 8.8% graduation, a much higher percentage of poverty rate for these New York City boroughs. So I would say that that's definitely a correlation. The next one is percent grad in rent. So let's go ahead and do percent grad. I'm wondering if percent graduate has to do with how much rent you can afford. So insert, ooh, look at this, a very positive correlation. I'm going to add my trend line. Yes, as graduation rates go up, so does the amount of rent a person can afford. Now, these are all good examples of negative and positively correlated. Uh, but let's look at one that there seems to be no relationship. So poverty rate in the linear trend line. So let's quick pop back to Excel. Poverty rate in commute time is what I meant to say. Sorry. So if I go to poverty rate in commute time, I'm all over the place because my Zoom window's popping up. I apologize. So insert scatter plot. Really not a correlation here. And you kind of have to think about it, especially in New York. Whether you're rich or poor, a lot of people commute in, especially if you can't afford the high rent down in Manhattan, but you work in a downtown building, your commute could be over an hour by subway and train. A lot of people like to live on Long Island and have a big pricey home, but still drive in or take the subway or train into town. So here we're not really seeing any kind of a relationship between those two variables. And in my last example, I'll go back to the PowerPoint. I thought this was a cool one, a nonlinear relationship. So we're looking at straight lines of negative, positive for a correlation. But I like this one, this polynomial trend line. So it kind of makes sense if you're looking at heating and cooling that your costs are going to be higher in when the temperatures are lower because you're running your furnace. When temperatures kind of ease out, like my friend in San Diego, I don't think he owned an air conditioner until a couple years ago because it's always sunny and nice in San Diego until the few days it's not, and he wishes he had an air conditioner. And then certainly as it gets hotter, the monthly heating bills go up because you're running your air conditioning. And so what I thought is like, okay, I can just show you this PowerPoint slide here, but I wanted to show you something, as I say, is actually in nature. So I thought, like, is this really true? So I went out to DETE. Some of you might have Consumers Energy, and there's a little button where you can analyze your usage, and you can even download the data set. And so I thought this was really neat. It does have that different type of a correlation where it's not straight line. I love the months of April and May and October, November because we're not running the furnace as much or the air conditioning, and we don't have these peak temperatures of cold and hot. And it even gives you the temperatures at the top. So you can see very expensive February, March dips down, goes up, goes down, goes up. And what I thought was pretty cool, and I'll actually show you the data, is I actually went out and downloaded the data set from DTE. And what you're looking at here, about 18,000 data points. Every data point is our kilowatt hour consumption per hour. So it looks messy. I know we talked about like high data ink ratio charts. Well, this one here, I just thought it was interesting to throw all the scatter points on a map and see what it looks like. And I can see at the hourly usage, yes, you have these outliers. So up here on 3/5/2024, who knows what we had going, but we used quite a bit of energy that hour for some reason. But you can definitely see at the hourly that it dips down in the spring, back up and down. So again, data exists everywhere. Sometimes you just have to go find it or just log into your credit card company and download your statement or your bank bill or your electricity company and put it in Excel, create a table, visualize the data, and then lastly, drumroll, tell the story of the data. What is the data telling you after you analyzed it and visualized it? So I hope this is helpful. Again, I encourage you to go through the entire PowerPoint, look at the chapters in the textbook that are online in Canvas, and certainly reach out if you have any questions. And I hope this was helpful. Thank you.